Hey guys, Bix Weir, Roota.com. I'm really excited to have Andy Schectman from Miles Franklin on the line to talk about silver and gold and getting precious metals. I know a lot of you guys are just crypto guys. And being a crypto guy, you probably understand that the monetary system's in trouble. We need a new way out. There was an old way out that people were using for thousands of years. I think it will be extremely important, especially what's going on right now with the central banking, everybody printing money and revelations that all those crazy tinfoil hat guys at GATA and Ted Butler and everybody else who was screaming manipulation over the last 20 years were 100% correct. Now is the time. They're still suppressing the price. So Andy, thank you for getting on the line with us. And let's talk about. Oh my God, we go way back.
Yeah, we do, Bix. It's good to see you again, buddy. We do go way back. I don't even remember how long ago it was, but I know that we have some friends in common in the industry at BFI Consulting, and we've been I think I don't know, it's been at least 15 plus years that I've known you. So it's certainly been long overdue, and it's good to be back. I'm glad to take part in what you're doing. I follow you every day. I think your information, especially on the repo market, is unparalleled, and so kudos to you. And I'm thrilled to be part of what you're doing.
It's awesome. And I do remember a time when you came out to the Berkeley area with Andy Hoffman, and we were at the Claremont Hotel talking to big time investors about how to get precious metals into your portfolio. That had to be like 8 to 10 years ago.
That was with the BFI Consulting folks. That's right. And that was the last time I think I've seen you. So it's certainly good to even, albeit over the internet. It's nice to see you again, Bix.
Thank you. It's good to see you too. Let's talk a little about kind of where we are in silver. I've talked a lot at Road to Roota about silver manipulation for the past 20 years, really. And I kind of gave up on the ability to stop the manipulation because I knew the government was involved, the major banks were involved. And so for the past 5 years, I've been concentrating on the cryptocurrencies. They're inventing ways around these governments and things like that, which is great. But with the current signs of things to come, the positioning of the large short position and the revelations coming out of JP Morgan that they were actually rigging the markets with other banks, can you give us a little kind of what the Miles Franklin take is on what's going down right now and how it will affect the physical market?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd like to take this back a little ways to kind of set the stage for how I look at this. And so if we go all the way back to when I started in this industry, I've been doing this since 1990. And way back then, I could never understand why the central banks in particular were always rushing to sell their metal. And I'm going to use the word gold a lot, Bix, but when I say gold, I mean silver too. And not so much in terms of the way the central banks deal with it, but by extension, there's a 90% correlation in their movement since the beginning of time. So if I say gold, I'm sorry, I mean silver too, but we're going to set the stage with gold. When we go back all the way to the 90s, I could never understand why the central banks lined up as fast as they did to sell their gold. In fact, they all signed on to something called the Washington Agreement, if you remember, which limited what they could sell to 500 metric tons a year so as to not completely destabilize the market. It never made sense to me. I couldn't quite understand it until recently. And I believe what happened recently is the most significant game-changing watershed moment of my 30-year career. And for anyone who owns precious metals and anyone who's struggled with manipulation, you got to pay attention to this, because to me, there is no other event in my entire career that is as significant as this, and that is the Basel III reclassification of gold as a tier 1 asset. But let's look at what a tier 3 asset is first, which gold always was. So until April 1st of 2019, Bix, gold was a tier 3 asset, which meant that only 50% of the value was calculated on a balance sheet. So think about the new age central bankers that were coming online in the 90s who looked at gold and said, what do we want this crap for? There are 4 reasons why they wouldn't have wanted it. 1, cost money to store. 2, it didn't earn any interest. 3, it was unpredictable in its movement. But 4, the 4th reason was the big one, and that was the tier 3 status, which meant they could only declare 50% of the value on their balance sheet, which, by contrast, would completely denigrate their ability to sell bonds and transact international business. So you put all those four together, and the central banks would be like, let's get rid of this stuff and buy a tier one asset. Well, what was the only tier one asset? US dollars and treasuries. It put a floor under the treasury market, gave impetus for all the central banks to shed their gold and to buy dollars. Well, lo and behold, we look at what happened as of April 1st of 2019. Gold is now the only other tier one asset on the planet. And that should sink in for a minute. It's the only other tier one asset on the planet. Now, the central bankers, they take care of themselves, I would argue. And since 2018, the central banks have been accumulating gold voraciously. In fact, in 2018, when I think they were alerted to this change that was coming, the increase in gold purchases by the central banks was the highest level it had been in the previous 55 years. 2019, last year, those numbers were up almost 90%. And this year, 2020, the trend continues unabated, with every little central bank from Central America to Eastern Europe gobbling up precious metals and selling dollars. Now, you put that in contrast with what's going on with JP Morgan, who over the last 7, 8, 9 years has amassed the singular largest physical private position of metals the world has ever seen. Over 900 million ounces of silver, over 25 million ounces of gold, as they've rigged the price lower. So the question is not why have they been manipulating? That's very obvious. The Justice Department has levied, as you've said many times, RICO charges on 6 of their traders, calling it a criminal enterprise. It is indeed a manipulator. There's no question about that. But the real issue, or the question, is why? And I think that they've been acquiring it over the last several years for this reason: to de-dollarize, to protect themselves against the end game, against all the things that you've talked about for so long. They're preparing for the end game. And bottom line is, when the most sophisticated, well-funded, well-informed, influential traders on the globe are completely and totally repositioning quietly, when no one talks about this except fringe guys like you and I, when it's not in the mainstream media, when no one knows about the Basel III Accord, when no one knows that the single largest asset in the United States right now, liquid asset, is student debt. The information that needs to get out there isn't out there, but the big money knows about it, and they're preparing. They are de-dollarizing, and they are accumulating physical metals. So whether you look to JP Morgan or whether you look at the central banks, they are all doing what we should all be doing, and that is mitigating our exposure to a currency that, by the government's own admission, is north of $120 trillion in debt, with funded and unfunded liabilities, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government, military pensions, with only $3.8 trillion in assets, of which the single largest asset is student debt, and half of the Democratic Party is trying to wipe away. Bottom line is, Bix, the biggest question that anyone should be asking themselves is not how much should I own in metals or cryptocurrencies. It should be, what exposure do I want to a currency that is totally effed and going down a river with no paddle?
See, that's why I bring Andy on. In the past 5 years that I've been looking at cryptos, he's still been studying the precious metals. You nailed it to a T. The only thing I would add is the why question. Why is the government going after JP Morgan now? I believe, clearly it started kind of with JP Morgan and Bear Stearns when they took over the short position and manipulated the futures market and the COMEX down to buy the physical stuff. I don't think they'd be going after JP Morgan if they were just only shorting the market. I think the government would be fine with that. The fact that they're taking physical and storing it away without the consent of our government, that's what I think they don't like. And that's why I think the government's going to be taking them down. At least, well, we know of the 6 traders that are getting charged with RICO charges, which is racketeering. That's a big deal because you lose 3 times what the crime is. So if they stole 900 million physical ounces of silver, they're going to have to pay back, what, 2.7 million ounces of physical silver that's not available.
Well, one of the things
billion ounces, 2.7 billion ounces.
Correct. But one of the things that they've done so masterfully. So if we look back throughout history, the Hunt brothers tried to corner the silver market by realizing there was more paper contracts than silver was in the warehouse. So they tried to buy 1 million ounces of, 100 million ounces of silver. Is that right? That's right.
Yep,
100 million ounces of silver. That's correct. and they were thwarted. JP Morgan on COMEX right now has roughly 1.5 or 200 million ounces. So they're already over what the Hunt brothers did. But one of the things that Ted Butler surmises that is so, I guess you could call it diabolically smart, is that they have, if you look at the mint numbers, and this is really, really interesting. If you look at the mint numbers from 2008 to 2016, and then look at it before 2008. Now I'm going to kind of butcher these a little bit. I'm doing this from memory. But the Canadian Mint, the Canadian Royal Canadian Mint made Maple Leafs up until 2008. Their numbers never eclipsed 3 or 4 million ounces ever. On average, was 1 to 2 million Maple Leafs. From 2008 through 2016, they averaged closer to 25 million. The United States Mint, over the same time, their numbers went from 4, 5, 6 million per year to north of 30 or 40 million per year. And this was as the price of silver was coming down. And I can remember talking to other guys in the industry saying, who the hell's buying all of these Eagles and Maple Leafs? One of the things Butler surmises is that most of the silver that they've acquired has been off of market. And so they've rigged the prices lower, but over 80% of the silver that they have there's no record of it. They bought it through the US Mint, through the Canadian Mint, through share repurchases on GLD and SLV. There are a lot of ways that they have done it that isn't easily calculable. Suffice it to say, that's the one thing that I've struggled with as well, Bix, is why are they going after them the way that they are when they've given them carte blanche, violating antitrust laws for so long. And when you look at the comments made by Jamie Dimon and Blythe Masters, both of them on separate occasions said that the metal that was in their account didn't belong to them, intimating it belonged to someone else. So there's only two entities that could belong to, the US government or the Chinese government. I have long felt it was the Chinese government holding a gun to the head of the CFTC and the Justice or the Treasury and saying, look, we know what you have been doing with the metals market for a very long time. We're going to do the same thing, and we're not going to dump treasuries. But we want to accumulate gold and silver, and this is how we're going to do it. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I will say this. The only part that's really confusing on all of this is why are they going after JP Morgan now? And are they only going after them for spoofing, or are they going after them for something larger? Those are the questions that will be really interesting to see how it plays out. And I'd love to hear your take on it if you have a take on it.
Yeah, I do. And that's a great segue into the repo market. Now, if you look at when the latest charges came down on the JP Morgan traders, it was like the day before the repo market went sideways. So September, it was right after September 11th. I've been saying keep an eye on that date. So it was the 17th, September 17th, that the repo market went up 10% on the rate, which is unheard of. That right before that was the announcement that 4 of the most important traders at JP Morgan are being indicted on RICO. No, first it wasn't RICO charges; it was just being indicted. Then the repo market goes crazy. The Fed has to intervene. They've been intervening ever since. Right now, it's over $700 billion a night. The reality of that happening, and then JP Morgan in the next few months, it was clear that they're the ones who pulled all the money out of the repo market. And then all of a sudden, the DOJ comes back to all 6 traders and said, we're going to bust you on RICO charges, which is the racketeering charge. And now we have, as of last week, we have a kind of a stealth kind of announcement that JP Morgan itself, the company, is under investigation for rigging precious metals for the last 2 years. And oh, by the way, there's another co-conspirator. So you've got RICO charges, conspiracy charges. There is a fight going on between the US government and JP Morgan, and whoever is, if it's JP Morgan or the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or China, whoever's the actual owner of the physical metal, that might be the key to what's going on, because whoever owns that metal knows the game. They know that at the end game, you've got to have your hands on the physical thing, because these paper contracts are ridiculous, always have been. So I think it's great. It's great.
It certainly makes the reclassification of gold as a tier 1 asset April 1st of 2019 seem a whole lot more conspicuous. and the de-dollarization that's going on by the world central banks. It's as if they all are, in on it some way. They understand what's going on, and they let the rest of us try to figure it out with little bits and pieces. But I think that you put it all together, and this is all happening at the same time. It has to be more than coincidence.
Yes, I agree 100%. And on that note, I have a ton of crypto people on the road to Roota who are saying, I'd love to buy physical metal because you keep screaming about it, but I don't know how to do it. I've never bought a piece of silver in my life. Can you tell the world of crypto what Miles Franklin does and
Yes.
and kind of guide them through what they need to do to get their hands on some physical stuff?
The hardest part for the crypto people will be my take on transactions of business. I personally feel that precious metals is more appropriate for the analog world rather than the digital world. And so as a result, I do things the old fashioned way, by relationship, by phone call. I've chosen not to have my online store any longer. The amount of fraud, identity theft and fraud, Bix, we could spend a whole hour talking about some of the craziest identity theft stories that I've witnessed at Miles Franklin you would not believe. So much so it made me close down my online store. I have zero interest in playing that game. But what I will tell you is this. We are located in the state of Minnesota. We've been in business for 30 years. We've never had a customer complaint in over $6 billion in transactions, ever. We are one of only 27 companies ever approved by the United States Mint as an authorized reseller of their product. Reputation means everything to us. We have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. All of those good things that should matter to people in a federally non-regulated industry, but the state of Minnesota could care less. State of Minnesota, where we're located, is the only state in the United States that regulates the precious metals industry. As such, nearly 99% of my competition has boycotted the state of Minnesota. They will not sell into the state where they would have to be licensed, bonded, and background checked the way we are annually. The bonding process alone is enough to make all of the online companies say, screw Minnesota, I'll work in the other 49 states. So what that means to your listeners is that doing business with us is bar none the safest in the industry, period. If I stole every penny that a client sent to me and went to a beach in Tahiti, state of Minnesota would remunerate the client and come find me on the beach somewhere because we're bonded and we're licensed and we're background checked. So all of that stuff in a federally non-regulated industry should matter.
I think
we do it the old-fashioned way.
On that point, from experience, I've been in ordering precious metals online during boom times when literally the mint or the reseller or whatever they were went out of business midstream, and trying to get your funds back, getting involved with the bankruptcy of a company that you really didn't know much about. I guarantee you don't want to go down that line.
No, and
I know Andy and Miles Franklin. I'm giving my personal guarantee on them being upfront and upstanding citizens on this front, because it does matter. And you crypto people who lost money in Mt. Gox or CX Quadriga or any other of the crypto exchanges, you know how bad it can get. So you got to trust the people you're buying from. And I put my full trust in Andy and his team over at Miles Franklin.
Well, that means a lot to me, Bix. And as a result, as we mentioned offline a moment ago, I'd like to make an offer to your listeners. It's going to be a little bit of an unusual one, as I'm going to be out of the country for the next week. But I would, by email at Andy@Miles Franklin, my personal email, I will receive emails while I'm out of town. I will forward them to my brokers or call these people myself. I will beat any price in America I will beat, but it has to come through me as the owner of the company. I don't care who they find, any national retailer, I will beat their price, whether they're swapping gold to silver or buying silver outright. I will make sure that if they are a Road to Roota subscriber, listen to you online, I will make sure that they get the best price in America, hands down, no argument. And I'd love the opportunity to earn your listeners' trust. That's the easy part. And given the opportunity, I can assure you that they won't be let down. You'll get not one complaint about the service or the price, the turnaround, let's just say it'll be completely transparent and upfront from moment one. So given the opportunity to work with your listeners, it'll be a good deal for everyone involved.
That is awesome. And as an advocate of swapping your gold for silver, I did a gold swap. It's a really strange story. I had some gold coins in this was a while ago when I had more money. I had 20 gold coins in a tube from the US Mint that I thought were silver. And it was in my stack of silver. And I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God, this was when gold was going crazy and they were still rigging the silver price down. So I had 20 gold coins that I wanted to do a swap. And I called up Andy. I said, hey, is this possible? Can you swap these for, and I wanted dimes. I wanted the Mercury dimes. Seamless, a little tiny tube, and I get these gigantic boxes of silver. So the 80, what is it, 85, 88 to 1 right now, the silver gold ratio, unheard of potential, even if you're a gold investor, to make more money, because if you look at history, all the bull markets in gold, silver does much better and goes much higher than gold goes. And then on the bear markets, it goes much lower. So
Well,
go
which
ahead.
is why when I do these gold to silver swaps, what I'm saying to people up front is, look, this is not a one-time trade. The idea, in my opinion, is to trade gold for silver at these ridiculous stratospheric ratio levels that we've only seen a few times in the last 150 years. And when that ratio normalizes, you have the option of swapping back into gold and doubling what you started with. In other words, the average ratio for the last 150 years, Bix, is about 42 to 1. We're double that right now. The last time we saw 80 plus ratio was 2010. And by 2011, we had 2,000 gold and 50 silver. We're at 40 to 1. So that ratio will normalize. It's as unusual as 4 feet of snow in the Florida Keys in July. That's what this 85 to 1, 86 to 1 ratio, it's a gift. And so anyone that wants to trade, we will make no commission on buying back the gold. We will assist in sending back the gold to us with insurance, and then turn around and send the silver right back to them. No problems, no questions asked. And in most cases, anything over 500 ounces is free. Anything under 500 ounces is a flat $15. So shipping will be a non-issue whatsoever.
That is amazing and wonderful and perfect. Exactly what I love to hear, because I want all my subscribers who have not yet got their hands on some physical metal to have an easy, safe way to do it. And giving Miles Franklin a call, send Andy an email, andy@milesfranklin.com.
That's right. That's right.
And can they call also and talk to a broker or something?
Well, so I want them. So that's ultimately what will happen. And so I'm going to give out my number, well, let's do it this way. I'm going to give you my 800 number. And if they call my 800 number, normally, Bix, I would be able to do this myself. But being out of the country, I want to kind of regulate this. So my 800 number is 255-1129. And you will get a broker. But to do this the right way, to make sure that they get the best price in the country, I'd like them to start by sending me an email. I will have a broker call them, or I'll call them myself from Mexico. One or the other, within just a few minutes after receiving the email. But to do it the right way, I want to be the one at the head of this, rather than having them call my office. Now, normally, if I were in town, I'd say call my office. But this is something I'm doing special for you. Whether I make zero money on a transaction or not, it's my way of saying thank you for doing what you're doing and getting your information out there, which I find invaluable. Honestly, I use your information every single day in what I do. So it's my way of saying thank you. I know it's a little bit unusual to have them email me first, but just this time, I'll make it worth everyone's while. I promise you that much. And we will put a voice to the call right away, but I'd like to have it all on record with me first.
That's awesome. So, and I know everybody likes using email anyway. So please email andy@milesfranklin.com with your say, hey, I got X amount of money. I want to buy X amount of silver, or he'll tell you what kind of price you can get, and he's going to match or beat any price out there. So this is a one-time. I don't know how long this is going to be open. Maybe a week or so, or what do you think?
I'll leave it open as long as I can. It'll be longer than that.
Okay.
Let's just say I'll do it for the whole month.
You hear that,
so
guys?
for the whole month of February, not a problem. As long as people call and email me, and I try to keep it going longer than that too. I'd love to help your listeners, and if I'm able to do it indefinitely, great. But for now, we'll say till the end of February for sure. And if it would be very, very helpful when they send an email to enclose a phone number as well, so someone can call them back.
Absolutely. And then building a relationship with the people you buy silver and gold from is extremely important. And that's what Miles Franklin does best. So
Well, you know what? You
Andy,
never realize how important that is until something goes wrong.
well, exactly. And I've been on the other end of that, and it's not a fun place to be.
Mhm.
Andy, thank you so much for your time and the work you do over there. And I hope you Road to Ruta guys who have maybe have some gold you want to swap or have never dealt with Miles Franklin, give him a call and you're going to really enjoy the experience. I want to thank you very much for coming out. He is going to Mexico. I'm going to Mexico, although we're going to be in different parts of Mexico. But I'll definitely have a little tequila and tecate for you on the beach.
Will I?
All right.
Well, look, Bix, I just want to say one last thing, and I mean this sincerely. I've done this for 30 years. You are at the very top of the list of people who I admire, respect, and appreciate. I'm always here for you, your family, your listeners. Anything I can do for you, let me know. And let's not wait so long before we do this again.
I agree. Hey, thank you, Andy, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Safe travels, buddy.